Hi, and welcome back to Reddit Confessions. Today's story might sound like something from a bad drama series, but trust me, it's real. Or at least, it felt painfully real to the guy who lived it. Let's get into it. There's a certain silence that feels like betrayal. Not the kind of silence you get when someone's asleep, or working, or focused. I mean the kind of silence that wraps around your ribs like a cold wire while the clock keeps ticking louder and louder, like it knows something you don't. It was just after 3 a.m. The lock clicked. The door opened slowly, like it didn't want to wake me. But I was wide awake. I'd been sitting on the staircase for 2 hours, in the dark, staring at the spot where her shoes used to sit, where they hadn't been all night. When she walked in, she froze. Not because I startled her, but because something had changed. The house didn't look the same. She looked around, first at the empty coat rack, then at the bare shelves, then at the folded paper on the kitchen counter. Her purse slipped off her shoulder, but she didn't notice. "You're up," she whispered. No apology. No shame. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. She stepped inside, confused now. Her eyes scanned the living room like she had walked into a stranger's home. The silence between us lasted exactly 8 seconds. I counted. Then she said it. The one sentence I had been rehearsing in my head all night, but never expected to hear from her mouth. "Did you actually go through with it?" I raised my eyes. She knew. She knew what I had done while she was dancing at her ex's party. Laughing. Spiting me. Sipping cheap drinks with people who used to talk about how boring I was. About how she could have done better. Maybe she could have. But now, better wasn't an option. Only truth was. I stood up slowly. My legs were stiff, but steady. "I told you," I said calmly. "The next time you leave this house for him, it won't be your house anymore." She looked toward the kitchen again. The drawers were open, empty. The framed photos? Gone. Even the coffee machine was missing. "You took everything?" "No," I replied. "I left you something." Her eyes darted to the counter. She walked over, her steps uneven, like the ground itself was shifting under her feet. She picked up the folded note. It wasn't long. Just 7 words. "Your games are over. I'm not playing." She stared at it like it was a puzzle she couldn't solve. "You're being dramatic," she snapped. "You're overreacting." I nodded, slowly. "Maybe. But now you can overreact in someone else's home." That's when she noticed the slip of paper under the note. A receipt. From a moving company. Dated just hours earlier. Her jaw twitched. Her voice cracked. "Where are you even staying?" "I guess you'll find out if you ever care enough to ask," I said, walking toward the door. She reached for my sleeve, but I didn't stop. Not because I was strong. Not because I'd grown a backbone. But because sometimes, silence deserves silence. I stepped out into the night, and behind me, the house finally let out a sound. Not from her. From the echo of everything she never said. The first night after I left, I stayed in the cheapest motel I could find. The wallpaper was peeling, the bed creaked if you even breathed too hard, and the ceiling had a brown water stain shaped like Michigan. But it was mine. My space. My choice. I lay there, staring at the ceiling fan that spun just slightly off-center, and wondered how I got here. Not physically. Emotionally. You don't end up in a $39 a night room because everything's fine at home. I didn't cry. I thought I might. But instead, my brain decided to replay everything from the past 6 months like a reel of humiliation. All the nights she came home late. All the texts she answered in the bathroom. The sudden new passwords. The inside jokes with coworkers I never met. The perfume she only wore on nights I wasn't invited to. I saw it all now. Like puzzle pieces I didn't realize were a picture. And yet, when my phone buzzed at 3:11 a.m., my heart still jumped. Hope is the most pathetic reflex a man can have. The message just said, "Really? You're just going to vanish?" "No, are you okay?" "No, where are you?" Just a challenge. A dare. I didn't answer. I turned off the screen and flipped the phone upside down like that would stop it from existing. By morning, I had 3 more messages. The last one hit different. "If you want to talk like an adult, I'm home." Home. Like it was still ours. Like she hadn't invited the ghost of our relationship's death into our living room when she went to that party. Like she hadn't smiled in photos I would never see. Like I hadn't stared at an empty spot beside me on the bed for months while she built a whole other life right under my nose. I got up, took a shower that barely warmed up, and while I stood there letting the water drizzle over me like a broken apology, I decided I wasn't done. Not with her. With me. I wasn't going to disappear into motel air freshener and old vending machines. I wasn't going to let her rewrite our story like I was the footnote. So I sent her something. Not a message. A link. To an album. A shared photo album I had created during our first year together. The one where I used to upload goofy selfies and random candids of her baking cookies, singing off-key, and falling asleep with a book on her chest. Except now, the album had a new name. Memories We Killed Together. She saw it instantly. The read receipt told me everything. No reply. I didn't need one. Because I knew her. I knew that silence meant it got under her skin. That she'd check the photos, see what I had changed, and maybe, just maybe, start to feel the same crack in the chest I'd been carrying for months. She called that afternoon. I let it ring. She called again. I watched it ring. Then she texted me the first honest thing she'd said in a year. Ellis, what are you trying to do? And I finally answered. Wake up the part of you that used to care. No response. But I knew what she was doing now. Sitting in that empty house. Wondering how it all slipped away. Wondering if the party had been worth it. If her ex had smiled the way I used to. If the people who cheered her on that night would be there now that everything was breaking. And while she sat in that silence, I packed my bag, checked out of the motel, and headed toward the one place she never thought I'd go back to. Her mother's. Because if anyone knew the version of Geneva she tried to bury, it was the woman who raised her. And what I found there was the beginning of the end. Geneva always told me her mother hated drama, said she was cold, clinical, and impossible to impress. But when I knocked on her door that afternoon, clutching a duffel bag and a phone I hadn't answered in over a day, her mother opened the door with the kind of expression people save for news they were expecting. She didn't gasp, didn't say, "Where's Geneva?" or "What happened?" She just stepped aside and said, "About time." I walked in, barely breathing. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and old books, exactly the same as the last time I was here, which had been Christmas Eve 2 years ago. Back when Geneva still smiled at me across the dinner table. Before her phone became more familiar with her thumbprint than I did. I stood in the foyer awkwardly while her mother poured coffee and placed 2 cups on the kitchen table. No sugar. Just how I took it. That small detail nearly broke me. "So," she said after a sip, not looking up, "did she finally break you? Or are you here to tell me you broke her?" I stared at the dark liquid in my cup. She went to Mason's house. Again. This time, she told me. Her mother's mouth tightened. "Told you?" Bold. She said it was a party. Said not to wait up. Her mother finally looked at me. "And you waited up, didn't you?" I nodded. "Until 3 a.m. She leaned back in her chair, eyes cold but oddly sympathetic. "Ellis, I knew it was coming. Geneva thinks life is a chessboard and everyone else is a pawn. She doesn't fall in love. She wins people. But when she feels like she's losing control, she lashes out. Mason was never about attraction. He was about ego." "I think I knew," I said quietly. "Deep down. I just didn't want to be right." Her mother tapped her nail on the table once. "So why are you here?" I paused. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because it felt pathetic to say it out loud. I think I wanted to see if she left any of herself here. The version before she started lying. Before all this. Her mother tilted her head. And if she didn't, then maybe I needed to be somewhere she'd feel safe coming to, if she ever wanted to be honest. Silence. A long one. Then, with a surprising softness, her mother stood up, opened a drawer, and pulled out a small envelope. "I wasn't sure if I'd ever show you this. She wrote it when you got engaged. Told me to keep it. Said it was a backup letter in case she ever ran." I hesitated before taking it. The envelope was worn, like it had been handled more than once. I opened it. 1 page. A single paragraph. If you're reading this, Ellis probably figured it out. Or he gave up. Either way, I want him to know. I loved him in the only way I knew how. I just never thought I deserved to keep him. So I pushed. Like I always do. Maybe I wanted to see if he'd leave like everyone else. Maybe I needed to believe someone wouldn't. But if he's gone, I guess I was wrong. My throat tightened. I closed the letter and sat in stunned silence. "She writes herself into corners," her mother said softly. "Then blames the walls." I left that night with the envelope in my jacket and a dozen new questions I didn't have the energy to answer. But I didn't go back to the motel, or to the house, or even to my friend Jamie's place, who had offered a couch weeks ago. I went to the park, the one where Geneva and I had our first real argument, believe it or not. And I waited there for sunrise. Because sometimes, before the day breaks, You need to know if the night is really done hurting you. At 6:43 a.m., the light cracked open the sky like a secret finally giving in. I'd been sitting on the same cold bench for nearly 4 hours, clutching Geneva's old letter and a paper cup of gas station coffee that had long since gone cold. My legs were numb, and my neck ached from leaning against the iron armrest, but none of that mattered. What mattered was that I hadn't gone home. And the moment she pulled up behind my car, I realized she knew exactly where to find me. Geneva stepped out of her car slowly, cautiously, like the park might bite. She wasn't wearing makeup, and her hair was still damp from a quick shower. No red heels, just an oversized sweatshirt and old jeans, ones I hadn't seen in months. "You look terrible," she said, walking up the path. "Thanks," I replied without looking at her. "I've been trying." She sat down next to me like it wasn't weird, like she belonged there. "I called your sister. She didn't know where you were. I called your job. They said you took time off." "I did. And my mom," she added, brushing something invisible off her knee. "She said she gave you the letter." I didn't respond. "You weren't supposed to read that," she said after a pause, quieter this time. "Then why'd you write it?" She didn't answer right away, just stared at the trees in the distance like they might interrupt. Finally, she exhaled. "Because I didn't think I'd be brave enough to say it out loud." I turned to her slowly. "So say it now." She flinched at that, just for a second. "I made a mistake, Ellis." I waited. "I went to Mason's to prove something to myself," she continued. "I thought, maybe if I stood in that place again, with him, I'd feel like I had control. Like I wasn't invisible anymore." "Invisible to who?" I asked, genuinely confused. She looked at me, eyes glassy. "To you. You stopped fighting for me, Ellis. You stopped noticing when I changed my hair. You stopped checking in when I worked late. You just stopped trying." That stung, not because it was true, but because she believed it. "I didn't stop," I whispered. "I just got tired of begging someone to come home when they already had one foot out the door." We sat in silence for a long time. Birds chirped like they had no idea lives were collapsing beneath them. Then she said something that changed everything. "I didn't sleep with him." I looked at her, hard, trying to read between her blinking. "Not that night," she clarified. "Not ever. Not even when I wanted to." "You wanted to?" I asked, feeling something sharp twist in my gut. Geneva nodded slowly. "Not because I loved him, because I hated you." And there it was. The truth. Not wrapped in flowers. Not sugar-coated. Just dropped on the ground between us like broken glass. "You hated me enough to think about it?" I asked. She shook her head. "I hated how easy you made it to hurt you." I stood up. Not out of anger. Out of heartbreak. Because somewhere along the way, I had stopped being a partner and started being her target. And now, she wanted me to comfort her for it. She didn't stop me when I turned to leave. Didn't say another word. Just sat on the bench. The same one where we had once kissed in the rain during our second month of dating. This time, the only thing falling from the sky was sunlight. And it didn't warm anything. I didn't go far after I left her sitting on that bench. Truth is, I didn't even drive off. I sat in my car just around the corner, parked behind the tall hedges near the old community bulletin board. I needed a few minutes to gather myself, to figure out whether I'd just had closure or if I'd been manipulated all over again. But then I saw something I wasn't supposed to. Another car pulled into the lot, slowly. It didn't park next to Geneva's car. It stopped right in front of her. She stood up fast, like she was expecting it. A tall man got out. Black hoodie, hands in his pockets. It wasn't Mason. It was someone I didn't recognize. Geneva walked up to him and said something. He nodded. Then she handed him a small manila envelope from her bag, one I hadn't noticed when she arrived. He didn't even open it. Just looked at her, patted her shoulder, and left. She stayed frozen for a second, eyes darting toward where I'd disappeared earlier. Then she got back in her car and drove away like nothing happened. And just like that, I knew, whatever that park meetup was about, it wasn't about reconciliation. It was a transaction, and I wasn't part of it. I followed the guy. Yeah, I know it was stupid, risky, but I had this burning in my chest that wouldn't cool down. I didn't tail him close. I kept enough distance that even a cautious driver wouldn't notice. He drove across town and parked outside a gray building I'd never paid attention to before. No sign, no lights, just one rusted metal door. He got out, walked in, and didn't come back out. I sat in my car for another 20 minutes, pulse in my throat. Then I drove home, not to our old house, but to Jamie's place. My friend finally convinced me to crash there. He'd been texting me all week with offers and sarcastic guilt trips. About time, Jamie muttered as I dropped my bag inside the door. You look like someone who just lost a fight with a blender. I didn't tell him about the guy in the hoodie. I didn't tell him about the envelope. Instead, I laid on his couch with a blanket that smelled like detergent and told myself it was none of my business anymore. But Geneva made it my business the next day. She showed up at Jamie's house. In person. She didn't knock. She pounded on the door like it owed her money. Jamie answered it before I could react, and she barged in, eyes wild. Ellis, she hissed, are you following me? I stood up slowly. You tell me. Should I be? Her face twitched. What are you talking about? The guy at the park, I said calmly. You handed him something. And then he walked into some creepy building like he was being paid in codes and blood samples. She laughed. Actually laughed. That's what this is now? You're building conspiracies? I didn't flinch. So explain it. She folded her arms. You want the truth? Fine. He's a private investigator. That stopped me cold. Why? I asked. Why would you hire one? To watch you, Ellis. She dropped those words like they meant nothing. I thought you were cheating, she said. Months ago, you were acting distant, distracted, always checking your phone, always walking out of the room when I came in. I blinked, speechless. So you hired a PI instead of asking me? She shrugged. That's what people do when they're scared. I felt my voice tremble. Were you scared or just guilty? She didn't answer. Jamie looked back and forth between us, completely lost. And in that moment, standing in someone else's living room, in borrowed clothes, with a woman I no longer recognized telling me she had been spying on me while accusing me of betrayal, I realized something I hadn't dared admit until now. Geneva wasn't broken. She was dangerous. Not in a dramatic, movie villain way, but in the subtle way people rewrite reality to fit their version of the truth. And I had lived inside her version for far too long. I wish I could tell you I stormed out of that house with pride, that I told Geneva to get lost and never come back, that I had some heroic moment where I reclaimed my dignity with a fiery speech that made Jamie high-five me afterward. But none of that happened. Instead, I stood there like a broken hinge, stuck in the frame, barely holding. Geneva left with the same huff she always used when she thought she'd made a point. But her eyes weren't angry. They were terrified, not because I'd followed her, but because I hadn't cracked. She had nothing left to twist. And for the first time, she realized I might finally stop playing the part she'd written for me. Jamie closed the door and just stared at me. What the hell was that? She thinks I cheated, I muttered, sitting back down on the couch. She hired someone to prove it. And I didn't, I said. But I think she did. Jamie sat beside me. So what now? I didn't answer. Instead, I called the number on the slip of paper I'd memorized after watching the man in the hoodie disappear into that building. Miller and Grand Investigations. The name sounded too clean for the kind of mess I was about to ask about. The receptionist hesitated when I asked about a report filed under Geneva's name. I told her I was the subject. I gave my ID number, my address, my marriage license. I expected to be told I wasn't authorized. Instead, she said, it's already been cleared for release to you. That sentence dropped like a stone in my stomach. 15 minutes later, I was standing in a dingy office smelling like cold coffee and printer toner while a man with tired eyes handed me a flash drive and said, "We don't keep hard copies unless requested." I nodded, muttered a thank you, and walked out into the sunlight that suddenly felt too bright. Back at Jamie's, I didn't even take off my jacket before plugging the drive into his laptop. Jamie hovered behind me, silent. The folder had 3 files. 1 audio, 1 PDF, 1 labeled Uncut Backup. I opened the PDF first. At first, it was what you'd expect. Boring, dry, notes on my movements, location tags, screenshots of me going to work, grocery shopping, a random Wednesday night where I sat alone at a diner for 37 minutes, eating pancakes. Then, near the end, the tone changed. Subject remains alone during observed periods. Target, Geneva, has increased contact with an unidentified male individual. Repeated late-night visits confirmed. Possible conflict with subject's knowledge of these meetings. There were photos, blurry ones, but undeniable. Geneva, standing on her tiptoes, whispering into someone's ear outside a building I didn't recognize. Her hand on his chest. Him brushing hair from her face. Her smiling, lips parted, Timestamp: 2 weeks before the Maya's birthday party lie. I felt the air collapse from my lungs. Jamie read over my shoulder and muttered, "Dude." But I wasn't ready for the audio file. I opened it anyway. The quality was bad. Windy. Muffled. But her voice was clear. "If Ellis ever finds out, it's over. He's already halfway gone." "Then let him go," the man replied. "No, not yet. He's still useful." I paused the recording there. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear myself think. Useful. That was the word she used. Not husband. Not partner. Not even obstacle. Useful. Like I was a spare tire she was waiting to trade in after the weather changed. I sat back, numb, while Jamie quietly closed the laptop. "I don't know what you want to do," he said. "But whatever it is, you better make sure you walk out with more than your dignity. Because she's been playing chess, man. You've been playing checkers with a broken board." I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I printed 3 pages from that report. Then I went to the kitchen table, took out the envelope Geneva's mother gave me, the one that once carried Geneva's just-in-case letter, and repurposed it. New contents. New message. I sealed it shut and wrote one word on the front. Now it's my move. I didn't deliver the envelope myself. Instead, I mailed it. Certified. Signature required. I wanted to make sure she had to acknowledge receipt, not just receive it. That was part of the plan. A small thing, but it mattered. For once, she wouldn't control the terms of the conversation. No walk-ins. No raised voice. No breathy deflections or watery eyes designed to delay the truth. Just paper. Just proof. Just silence. It arrived on a Wednesday morning, 3 days after I printed the report and repacked the envelope. Jamie and I had already agreed. Once it was in her hands, I'd cut contact. At least for a while. I blocked her number. Turned off Find My iPhone. Changed all the passwords to our streaming accounts, cloud storage, even the joint email we used for travel confirmations and cat food subscriptions. You'd be surprised how long a person will keep pretending everything is fine just to avoid those kinds of changes. But not anymore. At 9:34 a.m., I got the delivery confirmation. She had signed for it. The initials on the receipt were hers. She was home when it came, which meant that within 5 minutes of opening it, she would have read everything. The photos, the timestamp, her own voice, and a handwritten post-it note I left inside, just beneath the clipped report. "You wanted the truth. Here's what it looks like when it stares back." I imagined her sitting at our kitchen table, the one she insisted on buying instead of the one I liked, reading every line with that furrowed brow she wore when she couldn't lie her way out of something. I imagined her eyes darting to the corners of the room, searching for someone to blame who wasn't in the room anymore. I thought I'd feel triumphant. But the truth? I just felt empty. A kind of quiet hollowness that comes after a building collapses. Not from the explosion, but from the absence of weight. The structure finally gone. The noise over. Just dust and echoes. Jamie came home that afternoon to find me sitting on the porch with a half cup of cold coffee and a notebook on my lap. He didn't ask if I was okay. We were past those kinds of questions. "She get it?" he asked. I nodded. He sat next to me. "What now?" I wait. "For what?" "For her to prove me wrong," I said, without really believing it. But she didn't. Instead, something stranger happened. That evening, a Venmo notification popped up on my phone. Geneva had sent me $1.00 with a single message. "Please don't make this public." That was all it took for the anger to wake up again. Not an apology. Not regret. A request to keep her image intact. I didn't respond. But I did open the shared folder we used to store vacation videos, photos, birthday memories. And I removed myself from it. Every smile she ever posed for, gone from her cloud. It wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. That night, I went back to the park. Same bench. Same late hour. Only this time, I wasn't waiting for her. I was waiting for me. The version of me I'd lost somewhere between defending her choices and silencing my own voice. I sat for hours, long after the streetlights flickered out, until headlights cut across the parking lot and slowed to a stop. It was her car. Geneva stepped out, different this time. Pale, disheveled, holding something. She approached the bench cautiously, like it might break. "I read it," she said. "I know. I have questions." "I don't." She looked stunned, like she hadn't prepared for me to not crumble. "I didn't expect you to go this far," she whispered. "Then you never really knew me," I replied. She swallowed. "I didn't want to lose you." I stood up. Then maybe, I said gently. You shouldn't have bet against me. As I walked away, she called out behind me. But I didn't turn around. Some words only matter when you say them before the silence. The next morning, I returned to the house. Not to reclaim it. To say goodbye properly. I didn't tell Geneva I was coming, and honestly, I didn't care whether she was there. I wasn't coming for her. I was coming for Stanley, our cat. The only living thing in that house who ever showed me unconditional loyalty. When I stepped through the door, everything felt smaller. Not because the furniture had changed or the layout was different, but because the illusion had shattered. This wasn't a home. It was a stage we'd been performing on long after the audience stopped clapping. Geneva wasn't there. A note sat on the kitchen counter. It simply read, "Take whatever you need. You earn more than I gave." For once, she didn't try to spin it. I walked room to room, taking only what felt like mine. Not what I paid for, but what mattered. The old photo frame from our first road trip. A worn hoodie she used to steal from me. A half-written song in my handwriting we never finished. And Stanley, of course. He purred as soon as I lifted him into his carrier. He didn't ask questions. Didn't care about the past. He was just glad I came back. As I closed the door behind me, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Because healing doesn't happen when you win the argument. It happens when you finally stop having it in your head. I moved into a small apartment the following week. Nothing fancy. Just clean, quiet, and mine. I painted the walls a soft gray. Got a thrifted couch. Cooked pasta badly. Slept with the windows open. Stanley took over the windowsill like he owned the lease. Geneva never contacted me again. No apology letter. No voicemail. Just silence. The kind that used to scare me, but now felt like peace. It's funny how sometimes the most powerful moment of a relationship isn't the beginning or the breakup. It's the moment you realize you survived it. Months later, I walked past a mirror in the hallway and didn't recognize myself, in a good way. My face was lighter. My eyes didn't carry that tired glaze anymore. I didn't wake up bracing for emotional landmines. And one night, while watching some awful dating show on mute, I caught myself laughing. Really laughing. Not because something was funny, but because I wasn't pretending anymore. That's how you know you're finally okay. And that's where our story ends. Not with rage, not with revenge, but with quiet freedom. Thanks for watching this episode of Reddit Confessions. Now I want to hear from you. What's the one moment in your life when silence said more than words ever could? Drop it in the comments. Your story might help someone else who's living it right now. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more real stories, raw emotions, and endings that remind us it's never too late to rewrite the chapter. Until next time.